then I think you can better understand the specter of artificial life that haunted Artaud. And also his sense of disgust for the organs, his desire to make of himself a body without organs, without any point of attachment to the machine. What's at stake here is a refusal of integration to the automatic workings of the system. And that was the immensely powerful thing that Artaud expressed or tried to express, and that continued to reverberate all the way to the 60s and 70s, despite the censorship. Now, throughout his writings, Marx referred to the engineers and managers and political economists whom he saw as particularly significant to what might be called the operational theory of capitalism. People like Andrew Ure, who observed, perfected, and justified the machine system of their day. In the 20th century, one also finds such figures. And I think it would be hard to discover a man more essential to the operational theory of post-war capitalism than J. Wright Forrester, who's known as the father of SAGE, which is the semi-automatic ground environment, which was America's first attempt at a computerized radar defense system against the threat of Soviet bombers and intercontinental missiles. Forrester, emerged directly from the war. During the war, he worked at MIT in the servo mechanisms laboratory, designing automatic machines to aim very heavy naval guns. And then when he came out of the war, he went on to invent magnetic core memory and to direct the project of SAGE, which involved the perfection of one of the first high-speed digital computers, a process which launched the American computer industry and installed IBM as the leading private corporation of that industry. Now, SAGE was a vast man-machine system that grew in scope and capacity through the practice of wargaming, in which computerized information flow is used to simulate the perception of a threat and to coordinate the real interceptor actions which would be carried out against it. The system involved dozens of command and control centers inside the United States, as well as a string of radar installations placed around the Arctic Circle in geodesic domes designed by Buckminster Fuller. One Air Force general apparently described it, and I quote, as a servo mechanism spread over an area comparable to the entire American continent. So there you have the perfect definition of the first order command and control cybernetics that Forrester helped develop as an engineer for the military. What it's all about is integrating people, population, an entire continent into a closed-loop feedback system whose basic function is to destroy any foreign object that doesn't fit into the security criteria of its simulated environment. The relation between large-scale machine systems and computer simulation obviously marked Forrester, because when he left the SAGE project and went on to become a professor at the Sloan School of Management, also at Harvard, what he did was to begin analyzing the dynamics of entire industries conceived as more or less coordinated flow systems, where each variable has an initial level and a rate of output that impacts other variables in the system. This is the kind of thing that he was developing. So you can see that he's taken a multiplicity of aspects of the factory that he's dealing with. He's measured them all to determine the way that they vary in time, and then he's put them all together and projected them into the future to try and give a feeling for the way that they co-vary in time, so as to better manage the factory system. He's applying, therefore, a systems analysis to a really existing machine, and he's trying to harmonize the different rates of such complex processes that they often get out of sync and cause real delays, real overstock at a certain moment or understock at another moment, and so on. So he's trying to trying to actually perfect the flow operations of what become very vast machine systems, also spread out over the entire North American continent. It's exactly the kind of computer modeling that's still used to plot out the logistics of global supply chains in today's just-in-time economy. What's fascinating, and in many ways paradoxical, is that this kind of computer simulation, which aimed to overcome bottlenecks, boost efficiency, and allow industry to achieve higher levels of profit and greater capacities for expansion, was ultimately used in the famous Club of Rome report in 1972 entitled Limits to Growth, which generated simulation curves predicting an environmental crisis and ultimate breakdown of the industrial economy beginning sometime around 2020, about 10 years from now. So the paradox, or maybe the dead end, is that the only way the world had to imagine its own suicide was through the very models that are killing it. Now that last sort of statement is exactly characteristic of the kind of cultural critique that you would get in the 60s and 70s. Take one example would be a brilliant and very angry book called Labor and Monopoly Capital, which was published in 1974 by the labor historian Harry Braverman, where he recounts the development by the Air Force of the fully automatic computer-driven machining and milling technique known as numerical control, which is actually yet another project that J. Wright Forrester directed during his time at MIT. As the global recession came down hard in the early 70s, these numerically controlled devices, along with general-purpose assembly line robots, began to be widely installed in American and European factories. The result was yet more unemployment and deepening crisis. Describing this context, Braverman writes, in Business Week, we read, 5 years of inflation, recession, and uncertain recovery have forced the men who manage U.S. business and the men who make U.S. economic policy to come to a painful conclusion. Somehow the nation must make a quantum leap in efficiency. It must get more output from its men and machines. And Braverman goes on to comment, the very efficiency, he says, which produced the crisis is here seen as the only answer to it. The machine which, working at top speed, threatens to fly apart is to be preserved from that threat by running it even faster. Each capitalist nation will further degrade its own working population and social life in an attempt to save a social system which, like the very planets in their orbits, will fall to its destruction if it slows in velocity. In fact, in the introduction to his book, Braverman describes the immense problems that begin to appear in the early 70s, and of which the symbol is really the place where this picture was taken from, the GM assembly line at Lordstown, exactly in 1972, where these Unimation robot arms were installed on the line, and the line which was producing Chevy Vega automobiles was increased to the speed of producing 103 automobiles an hour, as opposed to the previous records, which were somewhere around 63 or something. What it means is that the speed of the factory was increased tremendously. And the kind of stress that this puts on workers was the reason that was given for this strike, which was a strike that the American public could not understand. Workers who were being paid well, protesting not against their pay, not against the prosperity which was being offered to them, but instead against the very technical miracle which they were supposed to fit into. That is to say, this highly automated plant where certain aspects of the work were already being done by robots and where it was increasingly impossible for the workers to imagine what in the hell they were doing with their lives in this place. So I think that this is kind of significant of a system which at that time, what I showed before, the SAGE radar defense system had morphed into a worldwide military command and control system. That was SAGE 2.0, if you will. And at the same time, the U.S. Air Force was using similar techniques in Vietnam to take every night and fly bombing missions to absolutely pulverize quarter-mile square sectors of the grid of what they called the Ho Chi Minh Trail in response to signals from sensors